So coalition talks are continuing as over 60 councils in the country failed to win an outright majority during the local government elections. While some parties have made it clear that they won't be engaging the governing party, the ANC's president, Cyril Ramaphosa, says his party will not go out of its way to form coalition governments. In Ekurhuleni, Gauteng, the party suffered a loss. It has been governed by the ANC through a coalition since 2016. We're joined by the executive mayor of Ekurhuleni, Mr. Mzwandile Masina. Thank you very much, Mr. Masina, for your time this morning. So we still refer to you as the executive mayor of Ekurhuleni?
Yes. Until the last day, there's no new mayor, so there's no vacuum in government.
Right. So your mayorship, you are the only coalition government mayor to maintain a coalition right through to the end of your term. So perhaps just walk us through some of the challenges and successes as you reflect on the past 5 years.
Well, a coalition are about mutual respect, about consultations, about communications. If those two things are not enhanced, it will be impossible for parties to work together. So over the past 5 years, we perfected the model of coalition government. Hence, I had to also have an opportunity to pen a book about the experiences, and the book is very detailed about how parties were reviewing us as the African National Congress in the period that we were working together. So I'm saying that the situation that we are facing as a country, voters have spoken, so we now have to sit as the leadership of the country to say, how do we work together? How do we ensure we create a sustainable coalition government? Because if coalitions are not sustainable, one of the major problems is that we are unable to deliver services, we are unable to pass budgets. So it will be important, therefore, that in all those areas that are harmed, including us in Ekurhuleni, we are able to put a coalition government. So we need to put egos aside, to put unrealistic demands aside, and make sure that we care about the voter, because the voters have spoken and they've put us in a condition where we are, and we cannot complain because it is democracy. So the democracy was at play on the 1st of November, so ours now is...
It must be something in the water as well. Are you able to hear us, Mr. Masina? We're losing you there intermittently. So let's just try and re-establish that connection so that we are able to hear you. Your last thought in terms of putting egos and unrealistic demands aside.
Yes, can you hear me?
Loud and clear, thank you.
Okay, so I was saying that we need to put our egos aside and unrealistic demand, because now where we are, it is about the people, it is about the service to the community, it is about good governance. So all those things requires us to work together as political parties that have been given an opportunity to govern. So those are the issues that for me are critical as we move towards this stage. I know that each and every party is putting its price very high. Even the ruling party, my organization, have really asserted with authority that we are not going to govern at all costs when people are not being principled in terms of what we're dealing with here. So I really want to implore all political parties to go beyond their egos, to really look into what is good for the community that we seek to serve.
In Ekurhuleni specifically, you've got the ANC, the DA, the EFF, and Action South Africa, two parties making known their intentions that they will not be engaging the African National Congress in terms of a coalition. That will be the DA and Action SA, as we heard as well yesterday. So going into this, who are you talking to, and what is the temperature of conversations?
Well, discussions are happening at national and provincial level. We're waiting for the leadership to inform us. It's just too desperate for parties to say they won't talk with us when we have not even spoken to them. I don't think that there's anyone in the ANC who have spoken to the DA, so they are just being pompous. It shows that we're dealing with an immature political party.
you're dealing with an immature political party. On 3 occasions, you survived, a motion of no confidence against you, which was led by the Democratic Alliance, I guess, and also drawing on, the lessons of the past 5 years in terms of how coalitions should play themselves out. What is it that you perceive the African National Congress will go into in terms of agreements and how the coalition will work?
Well, in politics, ideology is critical, so we will not just talk to anybody. I believe the leadership, wherever they are, we're not going to talk to just any part just for the sake of us governing, because there are certain things that are critical. We've got key resolutions that we take in our different conferences that must be implemented. You'd find that parties like the DA, they don't share many of the ideologies of the African National Congress, including some of the critical things that we must do. I can tell you now that we will not agree with the DA in terms of expropriation of land without compensation, in terms of nationalizing the Reserve Bank and nationalizing the mines and things like those. So in terms of free education, because they believe in a different economic system. So all those things for us are critical. So as we form coalitions, so we need to make sure that we talk to the like-minded. But, one of the most critical point I am beginning to see, especially with what has happened now, is that if we are not careful as black majority, we are likely to surrender this democratic breakthrough to the minority, and they will end up governing us because we fracture each other so much to the point that we have parties like Action SA, which is supposed to be a black party, saying that they cannot talk to the liberation movement. That is very, very strange.
Mr. Masina, I'd like for us to get into that in a moment, right? But let's take a look at this. Should, leadership come back and say you will not be made the mayor of Ekurhuleni, will you be happy to step aside and support whoever will be put in your place? Or are you confident you will retain your position?
No. It's never about me. It's about the party. So the ANC's got its own internal processes of electing the mayor. I was in the RSC yesterday. I was in the PEC. It's not my business to communicate what is the outcome. But when the ANC gives us another mayoral candidate, that person will have my full support as a member of the African National Congress.
Mr. Masina, and a few moments ago you spoke about the black majority coming together and not fracturing each other, and fearing to give the minority power. So let's take a look at your results and speak to what is happening in ground level and why people did not come out in their numbers, one, to register or to vote. So the sentiment on the ground when you speak to people, they have lost faith in the African National Congress, saying that we cannot be held at emotional ransom, to support this party, which we are not seeing progress on the ground in terms of improvement of our lives. What do you say to that?
Look, I can tell you that, at least in our case here in Ekurhuleni, it was not a question of the lack of service delivery in the main. There were other issues at play. So the ANC at the right time will have an opportunity to analyze what would have caused the electoral decline, not just in Ekurhuleni, across the country. I think it would be premature of me to say, these are the reasons why the ANC lost electoral support. But I know that there are a lot of issues in the mind of the voter. For instance, we've not, we've had a process of the Zondo Commission that has not been concluded. A general voter will have a perception that everyone in the ANC is corrupt, because that report has not come out to the public, for instance. We had COVID, churches were closed for the longest of time. You had the PPE fiasco. There were a lot of things at play. But I can tell you for certain that if these elections were about service delivery, it would not have occurred in Ekurhuleni. But because a voter generally across the country are perceiving the movement generally on some of the negative sentiments that have been pumped by the opposition, we found ourselves where we are now. There is no longer a time for us to complain, but we need to make sure that we work even harder to ensure that we bring back the confidence of our people, to ensure that they can continue to support the Liberation Movement, the African National Congress.
When you take a look at the fact that you did not enjoy an outright majority, which is something you are on record saying that you would have enjoyed, right, and not go into coalition with other parties, can we fully say that? I ask you that in relation to the fact that Ekurhuleni economically is very important. You've got the Maputo corridor, you've got a number of factories, you've got the airport. However, there are communities who are underserviced in traditional townships as well as in informal settlements. I will give it to you. You're one of those mayors that does do your work on the ground. So from the work that you were doing during campaigning, what did people tell you which then impacted how they voted for you?
Look, I think generally in South Africa, one of the biggest problems is the perception or reality on corruption. And secondly is the issue of jobs. So wherever you go in the country, you will hear that these are the two things that people are complaining about. I think that the advent of coronavirus did not assist because a number of people also lost their jobs. So these are the issues that people were raising during campaigns. And I have no doubt that the ANC as an organization will have to really sit down and reflect deeply. Firstly, people don't like organizations that are divided. So we have had many instances where the leadership is speaking in tongues. So it will be important for ANC leadership to close ranks and ensure that we project that unity and renewal that the president of the ANC has been speaking about in the main. So these are the things that, in my view, personally represent that which the electoral defeat that we suffered throughout the country.
Mr. Masina, perhaps a final thought from you in speaking to friends from around the continent looking at South Africa, some fearing and saying, sure, it would seem that South Africa runs the risk of being another failed African state, and you can measure failure in a number of ways, right? So I'd like to get your thought when you take a look at rolling power blackouts, you take a look at lack of service delivery, you take a look at what's happening with the education and health systems, a situation in the Northwest this morning where pregnant women fear, what's going to happen because they have to give birth in the dark. Those are some of the realities in South Africa. Is that a fair assessment, do you think?
Well, ESCOM has been an absolute disappointment, not just to us here in Ekurhuleni. We have been making a call, to the Minister of Public Enterprise, to the President, and the leadership at large, that ESCOM will have to allow big metros to supply energy to the citizens. We had situations where certain areas were without energy for 5-6 months leading to the elections. Those things invariably affected the outcomes of the elections. And I think that there are some pockets where we excel, either as a municipality or as the ANC. If you look at the number of students in universities compared to 1994, if you look at the number of houses that we've built since 1994, all those indications, including how we've improved health in the main, you will get a sense that the ANC has been working very, very hard, but there are some pockets where there is some disappointment. But in the main, we've really lived up to the expectations, and sometimes some of the successes become, issues because the way the ANC has made it possible for many South Africans, the demands are now high, so we've got to really, with limited resources, do much more for our people on the ground.
Mr. Mzwandile Masina is the Executive Mayor of Ekurhuleni. Thank you very much, sir, for your time. We do understand you were up until the early hours of this morning with negotiations on coalition. So we appreciate your time this morning. Thank you.